One of the things that I love the most about the book of Revelation in the New Testament is the way in which this book incorporates so much of the themes, the content, the images from the Old Testament. As we said at the very beginning of this series, From Dust to Glory, that for us to have a full comprehension of the sacred scriptures, we have to immerse ourselves in the whole scope of biblical revelation. Become familiar with the Old Testament as the Old Testament reaches its fulfillment in the pages of the New Testament. And we see that again and again in the book of Revelation. And I said in our last session that in the Apocalypse, whatever view you take of this book, one thing comes through loudly and clearly, and that is the triumph of Christ and of His kingdom over all of the forces of evil in this world. To get a taste of that, let's look for a moment at Revelation chapter 4, beginning in verse 2, where John is talking about some of the things that he sees in this almost ineffable vision that Christ gave to him. John is having the opportunity to look behind the veil, to look into the inner chambers of heaven itself. And now he is undertaken in the power of the Spirit to record for our benefit those things that he was privileged to see. And so he says in chapter 4, verse 2, "Immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne set in heaven. And one sat on the throne, and he who sat there was like a jasper and sardius stone in appearance. And there was a rainbow around the throne, in appearance like an emerald. And around the throne were 24 thrones, and on the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white robes, and they had crowns of gold on their heads. And from the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices. 7 lamps of fire were burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was a sea of glass like crystal. And in the midst of the throne and around the throne were 4 living creatures full of eyes in front and in back. The first living creature was like a lion, the second living creature like a calf, the third living creature had a face like a man, and the fourth living creature was like a flying eagle. And the 4 living creatures, each having 6 wings, were full of eyes around and within. Now, if you're listening to the imagery that John is using to describe what he sees in this vision, it is strikingly familiar to passages that we see in the Old Testament. If you remember the vision that the prophet Ezekiel saw of the whirling Merkabah, the chariot throne of God that appeared in the sky, that the description of what Ezekiel saw by the river Chebar is almost identical to the vision that John is having of the interior into heaven when he sees the staging of judgment, where the throne of God, the chariot throne of God, surrounded by this sea of glass, and where this thundering and lightning and all the rest is emanating from the midst of it. And the 4 figures of the eagle and of the lion and of the ox or the calf and of a human being are displayed. And not only that, the figures of the having eyes, just like the chariots of God. And then we read, the 4 living creatures, each having 6 wings, were full of eyes around and within, and they do not rest day or night, saying, Holy, holy, holy. Here's Isaiah 6. Here's what Isaiah saw when he saw the Lord high and lifted up. And the glory filled the place where he was. And he sees the 6-winged seraphim singing their antiphonal response, the Trisagion, the 3 times holy, 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 the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. And whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who sits on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever, and cast their crowns before the throne, saying, You are worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they exist and were created. So the scenario that is set for us in the 4th chapter is of the inner chamber, the inner sanctum of the heavenly sanctuary. And in chapter 5, the drama continues in a way that I think magnificently ties together the Old Testament and the New Testament. And let's look at that. This is one of my favorite passages in the New Testament. And I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll written inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. So he sees the person sitting on the throne having a scroll. And you know that the Word of God was written on scrolls of parchment in the ancient world, and then they were rolled up. It's like the Dead Sea Scrolls that were found in the decade of the 40s. But it was customary in antiquity for these sacred scrolls to be written only on one side. And it's extraordinary that a scroll would be mentioned having writing on both sides of it, on the back and on the front. We see that same phenomenon in the case of Ezekiel when God presents the scroll to Ezekiel and tells Ezekiel that he has to eat the scroll that is written on both sides. And we are also told that that scroll contained woes and laments and grief and mourning. And the scroll that is now hidden and sealed up with 7 seals is a scroll that contains a revelation of God's judgment on wickedness in this world. And so why it's written on the front and on the back, I don't know, but we see the linkage there between the scroll that was eaten by Ezekiel and the scroll now that is being held by the one who sits on the throne. Now, John is witnessing all of this as it's unfolding before his eyes, and he says in verse 2, Then I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, Who is worthy to open the scroll and to loose its seal? You know, one commentary on the book of Revelation argues that the literary form of Revelation is not an epistle. It's not a homily. It's not a symbolic history, but that it is written in the ancient form of the theater, that it is a drama that unfolds in several acts, as it were. And with that drama comes the tension of conflict and of suspense. Now, I'm not convinced that this is written in that form, but this element is certainly dramatic, because as John is looking into the interior of heaven and he sees this scroll that is written on both sides, sealed up with 7 seals, he can't wait to see what's in there, and he hears the announcement being made in heaven, Who is worthy to open the seals and to show us what's hidden here in this sacred scroll? And so you can imagine the anticipation that John has. He's on the edge of his seat if he's seated. But he's probably on the edge of his stomach as he's lying down, looking at this vision unfolding. And he looks in the panoramic view around heaven, looks at the 24 elders and the thrones and all that. He's waiting for the hero to come on stage and to take the scroll, break the seals, and open up the secrets for us. And so we have this sense of dramatic anticipation and tension. Verse 3. But no one in heaven or on the earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look at it. And so I wept much, because no one was found worthy to open and read the scroll or to look at it. So all of the tension of anticipation comes crashing into profound disappointment. You know, one of the themes that novelists used, in particularly mystery writers, when they want to maintain your interest and maintain the tension, is that they take the hero and they put the hero into a terrible scrape or a terrible jam. And you think as you're reading, there's no way out. And then what happens, according to this formula, is the hero survives the jam, but in the survival is cast into an even worse predicament. And it just gets worse and worse and worse, sort of like a James Bond movie or the old serial westerns that they would have the hero or heroine lassoed to the tracks with the train coming, and it would fade to black, and you had to wait till next week to see how they got out of that one. And so we have that kind of conflict and drama that's part of ancient literature. You think of some of the great stories of history that involve this kind of thing, like the story of the sword of King Arthur, Excalibur, that is wedged into the rock, waiting for the hero who alone will have the strength to remove the sword. Or even perhaps more poignant was the bow of Odysseus, Ulysses, where after Ulysses had gone and been involved in the Trojan War and now had gone through all his adventures trying to return home, in the meantime, everybody thinks that he has died, and Penelope is being besieged by suitors who want to have his hand in, or her hand in marriage, and all that's left of his house is his wife, his bereaved wife, Penelope, and his son, Telemachus, and the dog. Forget the dog's name, but in any case, finally she keeps putting off the suitors over and over and over again, and till the suitors get fed up with this story, and they persist that somehow she has to be able to marry one of the warriors of the town. And so a contest is set up in the castle of Odysseus, where the bow of Odysseus is set up. And the promise is made to the man who can bend the bow of Ulysses. It is that man who will be able to marry his widow, Penelope. And so the dramatic day arrives, and the strongest men of the realm come, and they all go up and they try to bend the bow, but nobody can bend the bow. And while they're all in this midst, here comes this man dressed like a beggar, who comes in to the thing and walks up to the bow, and takes it, and pulls it back with ease, and releases the arrows and starts killing all these guys. And it's, who else? Ulysses. He's back. That's kind of what I sense when I see John saying, who is going to prevail to open the book? Because now it's not a question of strength. It's a question of worthiness. That's the question. Who is worthy to open the scroll and to read it? And John says they surveyed the whole realm of heaven, and nobody was worthy. And here he thinks that he's going to see the contents of the mystery of all time. And now his heart is broken because he's let down in radical disappointment, because no one has prevailed. And so he said, I wept much because no one was found. But then one of the elders said to me, do not weep. For behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals. Talk about a roller coaster of emotions. Here is John, joyous anticipation, going to see the scroll open. plunging into the depths of despair when nobody is found worthy. And now the elder whispers in his ear, don't cry, don't despair. There is one who's worthy. For behold, the Lion of Judah has prevailed, the one who's come from the root of Jesse. Now, beloved, if you don't know the Old Testament, it's meaningless. But John knew the Old Testament. He knew what that image of the Lion of Judah referred to, all the way back to the book of Genesis, to the patriarchal blessing that Jacob gave to his sons. The promise of the kingdom went to the tribe of Judah. And Judah, the son of Jacob, was known as the lion's whelp. And so he would be the king. But the king that is referred to here is the one who is in the descendancy of David, out of the seed of Jesse. And David was known as the Lion of Judah. But obviously, what is being referred to here is David's greater son, to the Messiah, to Jesus, the Lion of Judah. So John said, all right. Okay. It's like Telemachus waiting for his father to come and bend the bow. Now John is saying, all right, where is the Lion of Judah who has prevailed? And he's waiting now for Aslan to come pouncing onto the stage with his muscular legs and arms and limbs and his powerful claws, and just grab that scroll and rip open the seals and let us see the secrets of God. And I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and of the four living creatures, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb as though it had been slain. Let me stop right there. He's waiting for this magnificent beast, the lion, in the fullness of its strength, to come and open the scroll. But when he turns to see the lion, he doesn't just see a lamb, but he sees a lamb as it had been slain. He sees a lamb that had been slaughtered. He doesn't see a figure of power. He doesn't see a symbol of exaltation. He sees the suffering servant of God in his humiliation, in his passion, in his meekness as the sacrifice for the people of God. In the midst of the elders stood a lamb as though it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out unto all the earth. Then he came and took the scroll out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. And when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures, the 24 elders, fell down before the Lamb, each having a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song. Do you remember we talked about how songs were composed in the Old Testament to celebrate a new victory that God performed for his people? The song of Moses, the song of Deborah, and now we have the new song that is composed by the saints in heaven as they come with the bowls of the prayers of the people of God, those who had been crying from behind the altar, waiting for their redemption. Now they begin to sing a new song to this Lamb. And God, who's seated on the throne, hands the scroll to the Lamb. Because the Lamb met the test. Remember the question: who is worthy? And what is the gist of the new song? Worthy is the Lamb to receive honor and glory, dominion and power and majesty, so that now the whole host of heaven is singing the praises of the Lamb. As the Lamb now appears in heaven to receive his reward, to receive his throne, because he has fulfilled his mission. He did what he was sent into the world to do. He accomplished his vocation. You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, for you were slain and have redeemed us to God by your blood out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation, and have made us kings and priests to our God, and we shall reign on the earth. And I looked and I heard the voice of many angels around the throne, the living creatures and the elders. The number of them was 10,000 times 10,000. And thousands of thousands, myriads of myriads, saying with a loud voice, worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. And every creature which is in heaven and on the earth and under the earth and such as are in the sea and all that are in them, I heard saying, blessing and honor, glory and power be to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb forever and ever. You see, it does matter if we find the key to the comprehensive interpretation of this book, whether it's preterist, futurist, historical, ideal. But the good news is we can take any one of those positions and still get this message. That one thing is certain, is that the Lamb has prevailed and has entered into his glory, and who promises to all of his people that they too will participate in his presence, as he has been given the authority to open the books. It is the Lamb who has the book of the Lamb, in which our destinies are sealed. And this is the revelation of his glory, which promises to us our glory.